In March of 1994, a joint military expedition was conducting what they called routine geological surveys in one of Antarctica's most isolated regions, about 200 miles inland from McMurdo Station. The team consisted of 6 highly trained specialists, 3 Army engineers, 2 Navy communications experts, and 1 Air Force meteorologist named Staff Sergeant David Chen. Now, what made this mission unusual wasn't just the brutal negative 40-degree weather or the fact that they were completely cut off from civilization. It was that their real mission, the one not written in any official report, was to investigate a series of electromagnetic anomalies that had been detected by classified satellite imagery. On their 4th day out, Chen's equipment started going absolutely haywire. His electromagnetic field detector was registering readings that, according to him, shouldn't have been possible on Earth. The needle was literally pinned to the maximum reading, and it was pointing directly toward what appeared to be just another ice formation. But as the team got closer, they realized this wasn't just ice. Hidden beneath centuries of accumulated snow and ice was the opening to what appeared to be a natural cave system. And that's when things got really strange. The cave entrance was perfectly circular, almost artificially so, and it descended at a gentle angle into the ice. But here's the weird part. The temperature inside the cave was significantly warmer than outside. Not tropical warm, but warm enough that their breath wasn't instantly freezing. Against direct orders to maintain surface contact at all times, the team made the decision to explore the cave. They descended for what Chen later estimated was about 300 feet, following this perfectly smooth tunnel that seemed to have been carved with mathematical precision. And then they saw it. At the end of the tunnel was a massive underground chamber, easily the size of a football field, with walls that weren't ice, but some kind of smooth metallic material that seemed to emit a faint bluish glow. But that wasn't the most shocking thing they found. Sitting in the center of this chamber was an egg-shaped object about 40 feet long and 20 feet high. It looked like it was made of the same material as the chamber walls, and it was humming. Not loudly, but with this low-frequency vibration that you could feel in your chest. The team approached cautiously, and that's when they noticed what appeared to be a seamless doorway that had somehow opened in the side of the craft. Chen described it as like the metal just dissolved and reformed. Now, any rational person would have turned around and gotten out of there immediately, but these were trained military personnel, and their job was to investigate anomalies, so they went inside. The interior of the craft was even more impossible than the outside. The walls seemed to pulse with that same soft blue light, and the air inside was perfectly temperature controlled. But what they found in the main chamber made all of them question their sanity. There were 12 pod-like structures arranged in a perfect circle around the room, and inside each pod was what could only be described as a humanoid figure in some kind of suspended animation. But these weren't human beings. The figures were tall, Chen estimated about 7 feet, with incredibly pale, almost translucent skin. Their hair was white blonde, and their facial features were sharp and angular, but unmistakably human-like. They looked like idealized versions of Scandinavian people, which is why Chen would later describe them as looking like Nordic gods. As the team stood there, trying to process what they were seeing, something extraordinary happened. Without any of the figures physically moving or showing any signs of consciousness, Chen suddenly felt what he described as thoughts that weren't his own entering his mind. The communication wasn't in words or language, it was pure concept and emotion. And what he received was a message that terrified him to his core. These beings had been hibernating in this location for thousands of years, waiting, and they knew the military team was there. The psychic communication lasted only a few seconds, but in that time, Chen said he understood that these beings, whatever they were, had been monitoring human development and were not pleased with what they had observed. That's when every piece of electronic equipment the team was carrying suddenly died. Radios, GPS units, even their digital watches, everything just stopped working simultaneously. In complete darkness except for the eerie glow from the craft, the team made the decision to get out of there as fast as possible. They used emergency chemical light sticks to navigate back through the tunnel system and didn't stop moving until they reached the surface. When they finally made it back to McMurdo Station, Chen immediately filed a report about what they had encountered. Within 48 hours, he and every member of his team were flown off Antarctica and debriefed separately by officials Chen had never seen before and who refused to identify themselves. They were told that what they had experienced was a hallucination caused by altitude sickness and isolation psychosis, despite the fact that they were at sea level and had only been deployed for 4 days. They were ordered never to discuss what they had seen with anyone, and their original mission reports were classified at levels so high that even Chen didn't have clearance to access his own report. Chen left the military 6 months later and has never returned to Antarctica. But he still has nightmares about those pale figures in their pods, and he's convinced that they're still down there, waiting. Our second story takes place in August of 1997, during what was supposed to be a routine night training exercise in the Mojave Desert, about 60 miles northeast of Edwards Air Force Base. Master Sergeant Rebecca Torres was leading a 6-person Special Operations unit through advanced reconnaissance training. These weren't fresh recruits. Every member of her team had at least 8 years of experience and had served in classified operations around the world. The exercise was simple. Navigate to a predetermined checkpoint using night vision equipment, establish a temporary observation post, and conduct surveillance on a mock enemy position for 72 hours. Standard stuff that they had all done dozens of times before. Everything went according to plan for the first 18 hours. The team reached their checkpoint, a rocky outcropping that provided excellent visibility across a flat desert valley, and established their hide site just after sunset. Torres was monitoring the target area through thermal imaging equipment when she noticed something that didn't make sense. About 2 miles out, there was a heat signature that was perfectly circular and appeared to be moving in a straight line about 3 feet off the ground. At first she assumed it was some kind of vehicle, but the thermal pattern was unlike anything in their recognition manuals. It wasn't giving off the kind of heat you'd expect from an engine, and it was moving too smoothly across terrain that would have been impossible for most vehicles to navigate. Against standard protocol, Torres made the decision to investigate. She left 3 team members at the observation post and took 2 others, Corporal Martinez and Private First Class Jackson, to get a closer look at whatever was moving through their operational area. They approached using standard tactical movement, staying low and using natural cover to mask their approach. But as they got within about 500 yards of the object, their night vision equipment started malfunctioning. The image would flicker in and out, and when it was working they could see what appeared to be a metallic disc-shaped object about 20 feet in diameter, hovering silently just above the desert floor. It was moving in a perfect search pattern as if it was looking for something. Torres and her team took cover behind a cluster of large rocks and continued to observe. That's when the object suddenly stopped moving and began to approach their position directly. There was no way it could have detected them through conventional means. They were using every concealment technique in the book, and their equipment should have made them invisible to any known sensor technology. But this thing came straight toward them, and when it was about 100 yards away, it stopped and hovered there, completely silent. That's when Jackson made what would turn out to be a nearly fatal mistake. He tried to get a better look by moving to a different position, and somehow his weapon discharged. He later swore that he never touched the trigger, but his M4 rifle fired a 3-round burst directly at the object. What happened next defied every law of physics Torres thought she knew. The bullets didn't bounce off the object or even seem to hit it. Instead, they seemed to just stop in mid-air about 10 feet away from the craft, and then slowly fell to the ground. And then the object responded. Torres described a sound unlike anything she had ever heard. Not exactly a sound, but more like a vibration that seemed to come from inside her own head. And then she and her team experienced what she could only describe as selective paralysis. They were conscious and could see and hear everything that was happening, but they couldn't move a single muscle. They couldn't even blink or breathe voluntarily. Their autonomic nervous systems were still functioning, but all voluntary muscle control was completely gone. The craft descended until it was hovering about 10 feet directly above their position. Torres could see details that she wished she couldn't. The underside of the object had what appeared to be some kind of geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly, and there were lights that pulsed in sequences that somehow seemed meaningful, like a language she couldn't understand. And then, without any visible means of transport, Torres found herself standing upright inside what appeared to be the interior of the craft. Martinez and Jackson were there too, also standing motionless. The interior was completely featureless. No visible controls, no seams in the walls, just smooth pearl-white surfaces that seemed to glow with their own light, and standing in front of them were 3 figures in what appeared to be some kind of environmental suits. These weren't the tall, pale Nordics from our first story. These beings were shorter, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with proportionally larger heads and limbs that seemed too thin to support their body weight. Their suits were form-fitting and appeared to be made of the same material as the craft's interior. Torres couldn't see their faces clearly through what appeared to be some kind of helmet or visor, but she had the distinct impression that they were studying the three soldiers with the same clinical detachment that a scientist might use to examine laboratory specimens. What happened next was the most terrifying part of the entire experience. Torres felt something. She described it as invisible hands moving over her body, but nothing was actually touching her. It was as if these beings were conducting some kind of examination using technology that could interact with matter without making physical contact. The procedure lasted what felt like hours, but Torres had no way to gauge the actual passage of time. Throughout the entire experience, she remained fully conscious but completely unable to move or speak. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Torres found herself lying on the ground in the exact same position where she had been when the craft first approached. Martinez and Jackson were there too, and their equipment was scattered around them as if it had been carefully examined and then placed back. The craft was gone. According to their chronometers, they had been missing for exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, but when they tried to contact their base team, they discovered that their radios were completely dead, not damaged, but somehow completely drained of power despite having fresh batteries. When they finally made it back to their observation post, the other 3 team members reported that Torres, Martinez and Jackson had simply vanished from their position. 1 minute they were there, the next minute they were gone, and their thermal signatures had completely disappeared from all monitoring equipment. The team completed their exercise and returned to Edwards Air Force Base, where Torres immediately filed a detailed report of the incident. Within 6 hours, she was ordered to report to a briefing room where she was met by officials who claimed to be from the Pentagon but refused to provide any identification. Torres was told that what she and her team had experienced was a training scenario designed to test their response to unconventional threats. She was informed that the entire incident had been a simulation using classified technology, and that discussing it with anyone would result in court-martial proceedings. But Torres knew what she had experienced wasn't any kind of simulation. The physical evidence was there. All of their equipment had been drained of power in a way that was impossible to explain, and both Martinez and Jackson reported the same memories of the encounter. All 3 soldiers were reassigned to different units within a month, and Torres was eventually medically discharged after developing what military doctors diagnosed as chronic anxiety disorder. She maintains to this day that what happened in the Mojave Desert was real, and that the military's explanation was a cover-up. Martinez died in a training accident 2 years later, an accident that Torres believes was anything but accidental. Jackson disappeared entirely in 2001 and has never been located despite extensive efforts by his family to find him. Torres now lives under an assumed name in a small town in Montana, and she still scans the night sky every evening, wondering if those beings are still out there, still conducting their examinations on unsuspecting military personnel. So there you have it, 2 military encounters that were never officially reported, involving personnel who were ordered to never speak about what they had experienced. If you enjoyed today's stories and want to hear more like them, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any suggestions for future stories, leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction.